Today is Friday, September the 13th. Welcome to When the Bell Breaks podcast. I'm your host,
Thank
Alexis Erlin, and our guest today is Eli Honeycutt. Eli, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You kind of have an exciting story.
Thanks, Alexis, for having me on. Where do I start? Well, I mean, really just a cult kid that
Just another
finally,
cult kid.
just another cult kid running around, trying to figure out life and coming to a place of really understanding, myself and really what happened to me and how I moved through all of that. And so, so I grew up in a blended family. So, my mother and father had both been married previously and had children from both of those marriages. And my mom, um, chose into the Jehovah's Witness belief system and then met my father through her older brother, and she brought him into the Jehovah's Witness belief system. And then I was their first child, and I have two more siblings behind, just beneath me, so there's eight of us. So kind of a large family, blended family. And primarily I call New Mexico's really where I feel like I grew, like that's where my heart really kind of grew up. I was born in Texas, but really raised and grew up in New Mexico. And yeah, a lot to talk about
It
because
sounds like there's a
queer
lot
kid.
in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot. But I think that the biggest piece about my story and like when the bow breaks and my understanding of sort of the trajectory of like the show or the theme of it is these moments when we start to really look at ourselves and what maybe we've gone through. And for a long time I had a lot of attachment to my story, and especially coming out queer and then being kicked out of the community and losing family. It was a great story to tell, and we love stories. Humans love
Right.
stories. Everything is a story, but we can get really attached to them. And I found that I was really attached to it from far more of a victim standpoint. And really, the other piece that was so fascinating to me as started to really look at my personal development stuff and spiritual
Mhm.
was that one of the hardest things for me, and I think many people who have left religious systems of belief and mind control and manipulation have really, like, who are they outside of those structures? But more importantly, how did that impact how you're showing up in life? And although I thought it was really well adjusted and did really well, and kind of pulled myself up, um, it was really started to impact me, especially in relationships and close relationships. Because I was so unaware of things that I was doing and the way that I was behaving, and almost like the fear of really intimacy. And then like a big, big thing for me is like was being secret, or keeping like having nobody else in my shit. So it's really interesting. I'm on a ton of podcasts. I've had podcasts I've shared really vulnerably, but that took quite a bit of time to come to a place of understanding the impact of that programming and mind control and shifting from victims. So shifting the story from it happening to me and being stuck in it, which
Right.
can really bog us down and also impact our lives and the way that we're showing up in life, to harnessing it and understanding the gifts in it, but also how that really was creating my reality and was really impacting my life. And
So
yeah.
I have a question. When did you first start to feel like this isn't quite right? Were
Mm.
you little or were you a teenager or were you an adult? When did you start to feel like this doesn't feel right?
I'll answer that. What my answer is going to come from where I stand right now, the way that I look back at it.
Sure.
The way that I
Yeah.
look at, we have to peel this onion back of all the maybe the ways that we look at lives and the lenses that we have on. Now, the way I look at it and being able to stand back with a little bit of wisdom, I don't think I ever really bought into it. It's boring as fuck. And I cuss a lot, but it
Right.
was so boring.
Go for it.
But in
Yeah.
in with Jehovah's Witnesses, what's really insidious is that when you look at our brains are so malleable between 0 and 7, and we're
Yeah.
taking on so much. And that's really when we're in our creating like our survival mode. Like, how do we get our needs met? Base food, feeling secure, feeling loved. And so, I was brought up in a family that had a lot of kind of chaos because there was a lot of kids. My parents made a cross country move. My dad went from having a job to being a business owner. That's a lot
Big
of
changes.
chaos,
Yeah.
big changes. And for a little kid to take that in, now I understand, like, oh, like and I refer to it in kind of a third person, but like he really had to go through a lot. And not only on top of that, Jehovah's Witnesses really teach a lot of fear and removal of self. So the thing about their what do I want to say? The way that they control
Yeah.
is to remove the sense of self, and they keep you hyper vigilant because you're always looking at yourself as if you're wrong.
Right. Yep. You're
So
always
a
second
little
guessing yourself. Always.
always,
Yep.
but I didn't realize that's where it had got inculcated into me when I was really young.
Mm.
And so when I look back, what I really have become aware of was that I learned that in order to be safe and have my needs met, because my other siblings were kind of all over the place, and I could sense that there were issues, even though maybe consciously as a child I didn't know. But my next oldest brother, who was 10 years older, was like a rebel. And so
Mine
what I
too.
really, yeah. So what I took on was this, like,
Yeah.
I could see how it impacted my parents. And so it's like, well, I don't want to be that. I want to be successful and to be the good boy, because we all want to be the good boy. We don't want to be the bad boy or the good girl, not the bad girl. And so I don't think I ever bought into it, but I think I learned that playing this role and creating this character that could play into it was would keep me safe, and it
Right.
would keep me what I thought was love.
Right.
Yeah.
My kid said something really interesting to me one day. I was talking with my son, and one day he told me, when we were talking about, oh, remember when we used to go to this church, and remember when we used to do that? And my son said something really funny. He said, I always knew it was bullshit, mom.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was is that I always kind of knew it was bullshit too. But you know, the idea that you have to keep yourself safe is so much bigger, and you learn that very early on.
Hmm.
I grew up very much the same way, very fear-based,
Hmm.
very scary religion.
Hmm.
And so you learn at a very young age you have to adapt, because this is what keeps you safe, or you
Right.
think it's what's keeping you safe.
Yeah.
You think this group is, you don't believe it, but also at the same time you still believe a lot of the things that you've been conditioned to believe, especially
Right.
when you're a kid. There's still a lot of it you do believe, even though there's some of it you don't.
Yeah.
um so yeah, very confusing time for a kid, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
you're getting these mixed messages, and then I went to school and I was the weirdo,
Yeah.
because I had to step up and be like, at the time, you still saluted the flag, did the Pledge of Allegiance in
Hmm.
school, and we Jehovah's Witnesses remain neutral, so they don't pledge of allegiance. So at 5 years old, I had to take a stance and be like, because my parents were like, you have to do this, because what I heard was pledge allegiance, death.
Yeah.
Basically, like that's the messaging. And
Hmm.
so it's like, well, I can't do that because then I'm dead. And the same around birthdays and all that stuff. So you're totally confused. And then you move into this next stage. So the next stage when I really knew something was off was, for between about 8 and 14 is when a lot of things start to happen for us, and we puberty and our awareness of ourselves, our body, others' bodies, those type of things. And
Right.
I knew that I was different. I didn't have the wording, or I just knew that I had a different perspective than a lot of other people, because I didn't like girls at all. It wasn't that they didn't have cooties. I thought that they were great to be friends with, but it was, that awareness started to come about. But it was so clear also because, I heard the messaging all the time that this was evil and wrong, and
Yeah.
that,
And then it's a choice and that you shouldn't live like that. And
yeah.
yeah, same, same. So can you walk me through a little bit about like how your relationship with your parents is like, or what it
Oh
was like
boy.
back then, maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I the sad, I think the really sad part of it is, and what I find sad for a lot of humanity, is the loss of, the inability for us to have vulnerable conversations and real conversations that speak truth with family, especially. And I know there's a lot of people that have great relationships, but I didn't know my parents, as individuals. I knew them as authority figures,
Hmm.
the rule makers, you know,
Yeah.
um, they,
The
I,
adults in the house,
yeah, the
Yeah.
adults in the house, the ones who are
Hmm.
supposed to feed you and care for you. But when I really think about it, like, I ended up being a lot of emotional support for my mom, which, um, now that I'm really aware of, I'm like, I understand that part, that role that kind of was playing out. But I wouldn't say I really knew them as individuals at all, because they would not talk about their past life, their previous lives before Jehovah's Witnesses. And we were really removed and isolated from our extended families.
Hmm.
So I didn't grow up
Yeah.
around, I didn't know
Yeah.
the stories. And I think the whole time, especially as a teenager, I got my driver's license very early on, and I started working, and I just did anything to not be in the house or be
Yeah.
around them.
Me too.
Anything,
Yeah. Same.
it's like, and I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't really do a lot of anything really crazy because I still had that fear of like God. But
Yeah, sure.
but I didn't know them, and in fact, I think the what I look back, and it is what it is. Now that my dad has been gone, I think almost 10 years. Um, and when I found out he was passing away, I had not seen him in probably like 13 years. And um, I got a half an hour with him totally alone. He was at home in hospice, and he was in mentally fine, like we could have a really good conversation. And
Hmm.
he, I was going on a 6-week trip that I had already planned to New Zealand, and I was going to be gone when he would pass. Like we knew that he was
Right.
going to go. And I told him, I'm like, I can cancel. I can be here with mom. I can, I'll do any of those kind of things that you need. And he looked at me and he told me to have a seat. And he's like, no, he's like, I want you to go live your life. Go, go live. I love you. He's like, I'm at peace. Um, and then we got to have, I really asked him some questions about his youth and like him,
Hmm.
because he actually was a really cool dude. Um, and he worked really hard. And so I have built a very different relationship with him now, because I see his wisdom and I see what he was teaching us. And I just didn't have the capacity to want to fucking listen to him when I was a kid.
Sure.
And I think it was also skewed by the way that it was delivered, but I think he was doing his best to teach us some real truths. And
If you'd like to be a guest, send us an email, wtbbpodcast@gmail.com. Back to the show.
in fact, but my mom and I have been estranged for better part of, now, I mean, what, like
Losing
17
track.
years? Yeah, I don't even know. And we had a conversation maybe 3 years ago where she really opened up for the first time, and she's like, I really apologize. There was a pretty major event that happened when I was 14 that was really awful, and it dealt with the Jehovah's Witnesses and some of the elders in the congregation. And she's like, I look back at that. She's like, I think I'll live with that the rest of my life. And she's like, when that happened, I couldn't be a mother to you. And I'm so sorry,
Ooh,
because she's like, I didn't know how to handle my own emotions, and I didn't know how to be there for you. And she's like, and I want you to know your father kept telling me to leave you alone and just let you be. And I stopped and I was like, what, can you tell me what you're saying? Like, what does that
yeah.
actually
What does
mean?
that mean?
And she's like, well, he was telling me to just let you live your life, to be gay, because we both knew you were gay from the time you were a baby. We knew it wasn't a choice. We knew it was you. We had always known it. She's like, but I couldn't let it go. And he kept telling me to, and I think that really impacted their marriage because things really changed. And I just wasn't aware of all that stuff. So, they had to deal with a lot of those burdens. And fortunately, I think we're in a place, or I believe, where, as we reveal who we are and we do this personal development and we get to know ourselves, we can really heal ourselves, not just through the mind, but through the energetics in our body, to move that trauma out of our body and to reshape the story and to be in a far more empowered, compassionate, unconditional loving of myself first, and then unconditional love of them. Right.
Hmm.
And like your mother or my mother or anybody else that's listening to this, you're dealing with their 7-year-old for the most
Yeah.
part. Their 7-year-old was raising you, because the 50% of our brains are the way we look at things, beliefs, structures, even the way we see color, the way we hear, the way we taste, everything is kind of programmed in between 0 and 7. And so we're looking at generations of passed down beliefs where ultimately, like your mom, my mom, did not have the capacity to heal or understand that 7-year-old, right? And their relationship.
Yeah.
So for your mom or mine, what I realized was that it had nothing to do with that she didn't love me.
Right.
What was triggering for her was that in her body and in her mind, that is, if she accepted me, that was death to her
Yeah. Or death to me.
or
Yeah.
death to you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's
And
fear.
yeah, and so then it's like, oh, I how do I deal with this? And I don't know how to deal with this, because their whole world would crumble for
Hmm.
the most part,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I struggled with cutting it off from my family. I knew what it was
Hmm.
going to. I mean, I still had no idea because I hadn't actually gone through it, but I knew that it was going to be rough
Hmm.
for everyone.
Yeah. So
So
it's
when
like,
you cut things off, was it kind of like was there sort of like an incident that kicked it off, or was it sort of a gradual thing? How did that kind of happen?
oh, I was dragging my feet. The universe made it happen. To be honest, like I look back, I was like, oh, I. It's like sometimes that happens, right? It kind of has
Yeah.
to blow up in our face to
Yeah.
actually make the change. But there's really two big things that happened for me, was that and I had struggled with trying to live out the character of being this good Jehovah's Witness boy, while just also living a double life, because it was just inevitable. But there really came a time where I felt a crossroads, and I could feel it. Like, it was just, I really felt like I only had two choices. It was either choose to be a Jehovah's Witness and totally cut that part off, cut myself off, get married, and just go with it, or accept that I was gay. And I'd always known I was gay, but there's something really different when you finally accept it within yourself and you really look at it,
Hmm.
or queer, whatever.
Yeah.
And I when I chose that, And I was just like, it was on a trampoline in South Dakota in the Black Hills. I still remember. And I was just like looking up at
A
the stars and
trampoline.
Mhm. Yeah, I was at a Jehovah's Witness like get together with some friends and I couldn't do it. And I was laying out there and it was like, you have a choice. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. And when I accepted that, life really started to change for me. But what happened was I got outed because some Jehovah's Witnesses were everywhere. They knew me. And oddly enough, the first guy that I really met and dated was an ex-Jehovah's Witness. And it just got found out really quickly, and so like that really just sort of ended everything, because then my parents found out and the elders in the congregation and all, it just blew up.
So did they sort of excommunicate you like formally, or did you just sort of step back from them?
I refused to go in. I knew what was going to happen.
So
And
you basically got invited to an excommunication. You're like, nah, I think I'll sit there.
I'm gonna opt out of that.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
no,
like, why
thanks.
bother?
Yeah,
Yeah.
not today.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cute. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. Thanks for the
Yeah.
invite, but I'm not available. And so then that really just set my life on a whole different course, because I lost all community and I really had no friends outside of Joe's Witnesses. So it was like, I didn't know who I was.
You are listening to When the Bow Breaks podcast. To support the show, visit buymeacoffee.com/WTBBpod. You can buy us a cup of coffee, or 2, or 10. 10 cups of coffee sponsors an entire WTBB episode. So if you'd like to support the show, visit buymeacoffee.com/WTBBpod. Back to the show.
Did you feel misunderstood by the mainstream? You're like, first I feel misunderstood by my religion. Now I'm away from my religion. Now I feel misunderstood by the mainstream because I grew up Christian and I felt very awkward, socially. Did you feel like that as a cult kid?
Yeah, because I wasn't really big into, I was not a big drinker. I didn't really drink. I had never done drugs. I never celebrated birthdays. I had never done holidays. And so like I was trying them out. And in fact, like the first Christmas I did, it was so overwhelming that ever since I just don't do it.
Wow.
Rarely.
Yeah, because that is a big thing. If you're not familiar with Christmas, it's a big thing.
No, it was exhausting. Yeah. It was I didn't like it. And it felt forced. And that was a big thing for me, is I'm like, this just doesn't feel natural. I don't care about the biblical beliefs or any of those kind of things. It just felt forced. It didn't feel real to me. But I think the big things were, I didn't know how to be in relationship. I didn't know how to make like friends, but we look, there's a lot of non-ethical cults and there's a lot of cults.
Yeah.
Cult is basically shared language, shared kind of community. So you could take, I live in Denver, so I always equate this like Denver Broncos, a diehard Denver Bronco fan. It's a cult.
It's a cult.
They have things they talk about. It's not bad.
Right.
But, moving into the queer community, then it was like, okay, well, these are the things we do, and this is how you be queer. And I was so used to adapting that I suddenly was like, well, I guess this is how you're supposed to be. Yeah. So I'm going to get on board with this shit and I'm going to do it really well. And I did it really well. But it still didn't feel aligned. And I always felt just.
You're just like, how many labels am I going to have to stick on myself before I find out who I am?
Yeah, I hated it.
Yeah.
And then that kind of blew apart too. So.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Did you kind of implode your sense of self a little bit? Did you have a little bit of an identity crisis? Did you really struggle?
Yeah, it was really hard because I didn't. Well, one of the things in relationships, like Jehovah's Witnesses always taught that, like when you date, like if you date, like if you're going on dates, that actually means that you're on the path to engagement to marriage.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So the poor guy that I first dated, not the first real boyfriend that I got outed with, but I went on a couple of dates with this guy, and I look back and I'm like, oh my God, Eli.
You're like, I
like
can't
no
believe
wonder he ran. Because I was just like, I really liked him, and then he liked me, and we went on. It had been, I don't know, can't even remember how long, but I was like, this is my boyfriend. This is who I'm going to marry, and like, this
Mhm.
is great.
Yeah.
I'm like super excited. And then he was like, I'm out, and I'm like,
It's like, so yeah. Did you
yeah,
feel like you were over prepared for or think you were over prepared for marriage? I guess a young adult because of your
yeah,
faith. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That's funny. Because yeah, same. I won't disclose too much about myself. But
yeah.
yeah, you get because we're groomed and we're conditioned to be a certain way from a
Hmm.
very young age. And then when we hit those certain, milestones in our personal lives, we have this incentive to go and do the thing that we were told we had to do.
Yeah.
But it's not always the best thing for
No,
us.
no.
So, can you tell me a little bit about what you do now? What's your life like now? Like, how
Yes.
long has it been since you've been out of the cold? I'm guessing like 15, 20 years, about maybe
I
longer.
think it was probably really probably 20 plus years now.
Mhm.
Yeah. I built a really successful career in banking and finance. And then that just was also, I was starting to look around, and this was a little bit past when my dad had passed.
Mhm.
And I just was like, what am I doing? Like, this doesn't feel, I looked at all my peers, right? And I was one of the younger ones in the job at the time. Like, I had gotten it really young, a pretty high position. And so as I looked at all my peers were 15 years plus and had been doing this job for like
Right?
like a long time. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I've been doing this job 10 years and cannot fucking do this. I just started looking at them and I'm like, this can't be life. And I started questioning, and I had really started to dive into more of like how I had been impacted. So like I had gone to a cult recovery therapist, started really my personal development uncovering.
Hmm.
And that just led me through a whole different landscape of coming to really know myself, and asking myself, like, for the first time, like, who am I?
Hmm.
Who am I really, outside of all these characters and beliefs and all that stuff? And as I started to really get down to that, I started to be able to heal, but also reveal parts of me where I'm like, this is more of who I really am, and these
Hmm.
are the things that I enjoy, and this is how my life, these are the things I'm really good at. So I do public speaking, so I speak a lot about lenses and perspectives, and I talk about and help organizations or groups really be able to take a very humanistic approach. So everything I do is really like based in like very human, very real, but also helping people understand and start to peel back and get curious about who they are. So I do that through public speaking. Um, I work with um, a lot. I work with men specifically, and oftentimes queer men, but a lot of men, and just helping them to understand masculinity, understand how to feel. So a lot of my stuff, the work that I also do is all around just helping people learn how to feel, how to understand their emotions, because the primary language that we were never taught was our energetic language.
Mm.
The vibe.
Yeah.
We talk about
The vibe. Yeah.
this does they don't I'm not vibing with
Some
that.
people say aura, whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good. We use these thoughts, but for the most part, yeah, I help people peel back the layers and reveal who they are, so that they can really start to not only heal themselves, but build a relationship with themselves where they can see that, like, I don't have to carry these stories. I don't have to carry this trauma. I don't need to, like, I can let go of it.
Hmm.
But it's not easy. And so, yeah, I do public speaking, I do men's work, I work one-on-one with people. I do use plant-based medicines in a way that helps. I don't just use that. It is like I look at that as one tool to
Hmm.
help a person kind of open up and be able to see themselves from a different perspective. And I find that really valuable, and that was very helpful in my own journey to be able to kind of crack the codes and to be able to start to move the energy out of my body. So yeah, that's a lot of what I do. I want to work with 7-year-olds.
Right?
Yeah, on a
Yeah,
playground.
basically,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. That's very unique. And I feel like it's definitely a service that is needed,
Mhm.
especially in this day and age. When we're all dealing with ours and our ancestors' past traumas and having to step out of religion for the first time. Some of us are first generation atheists, and
Yeah.
it's a big change for us. But if someone wanted to get a hold of you and contact you, how would they do that?
Right now, I mean, like Instagram is probably the easiest. And that's where I do a lot of things. I don't like to do things the way everybody tells you to do. So,
Good.
like it doesn't work that way. And quite honestly, most of my clients either come from my speaking or referrals. I work with like a lot of execs and a lot of therapists.
Mhm.
Oddly, I help a lot of therapists. Um, but Instagram is a really easy way right now.
Cool.
As I'm navigating, like exploring how I want to express myself
Yeah.
in business and how I attract. And so, yeah, that's how you can get a hold of me. It's
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah,
I was
pitch
gonna
it.
say, yeah, it's Odyssey Life Adventures. So that's my handle. Um, because life is an odyssey. And I think when I know for me now, if we can look at it as an adventure and we can really harness the fun within the difficulty, the difficult work, we can find more joy, and typically we'll find more peace.
Good stuff. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Eli, for coming on the show. This was really good. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing your story and things that you've discovered and sharing your work with us. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I mean, I think the more people we can have that give voice to healing their relationships with religion, family, but most importantly themselves and or God, and like overcoming those, we have to do this one by one. And
Mhm.
the more that we each take this on, it is I just have a deep respect of humans and what we're going through right now. And I think it just takes shows like this and so many different individuals to help other people take control of their lives and to be empowered and to find a sense of love.
I like that. That's true. We all need it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Eli, for coming on the show. You are listening to and watching When the Bow Breaks podcast. See you soon.